Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. At least I hope so. In this video, we're going to be comparing all the BR3 submachine guns for the Imperial Japanese Army and enlisted to see which of them is the best for you in your particular playstyle. Coming up first, we'll be taking a look at the recently reslotted Type 2A SMG. This weapon used to be a BR2 contender, but apparently it was too good for that tier, and that's something that I wholeheartedly disagree with, and I'll explain why in a bit. But first, to get into the stats, we're getting a maximum damage of 5.6, which is tied for lowest in the tier, and out to 100 meters that'll drop down to 3.2. Muzzle velocity is also tied for lowest in the tier, clocking in at 350 meters per second, which is really bad. Even majority of BR2 and BR1 SMGs for Japan have higher velocities than that, albeit only by a smidge. But I say that to imply that you will be strictly relegated to extremely close range combat if you want to get remotely decent performance out of this weapon. Not that SMGs are necessarily supposed to be known for their range capabilities, but I can say for this one that I wouldn't try anybody outside of 20 to 30 meters unless you like extensive shot leading. Another reason I came to this conclusion is the rate of fire, which used to be 600 but now sits at a pretty fast 750 rounds per minute, which places second in the tier. This would probably be a good time to mention that this gun does have auto slow and semi-auto firing modes available if you have a preference. It's not necessarily a complaint, but this SMG also has a standard magazine capacity at 30 rounds, and from my extensive testing back then and even now, it feels like I'm constantly running out of bullets mid-firefight with this thing, which leads me to wanting to only use the other firing mode, auto slow that is. And this happens even if I opt for auto slow, and I would just generally avoid using semi-auto on this thing, as I gotta say, subjectively this gun does kind of feel like a marshmallow launcher outside of 10 meters. But despite the constant reloading that you'll have to do with this gun, it is somewhat offset by the pretty quick reload speed at 2.6 seconds, which also happens to be second best in the tier, so that does keep me from completely hating the weapon. Like many other stats on the Type 2A, the shot deviation or bullet spread is also going to be tied for worst in the tier at 75, but as I stated months ago in my other BR2 Japan SMG video, the standout attribute or feature of this gun lies in the recoil, or should I say lack thereof. The control percentage is standard for SMGs at 60%, but what's outstanding is that we're getting some of the best vertical and horizontal stats in the game, coming in at 10 for both respectively. And this gun also sports a bullet pattern that mostly stays in one spot, with some slight upward jumping and right leaning drift. Nothing a slight adjustment with your thumb or mouse can't overcome. This alone may make you think that this gun is a no-brainer pick, but I wouldn't take that check to the bank just yet. Last thing I wanted to mention is the mobility and aiming experience as far as weight is concerned. This gun ends up being the nicest to your stamina bar, coming in at 3.4 kilograms, which is lightest in the tier, and this has great synergy for being able to keep your aim steady at all times, but also being able to constantly move around the map at max speed, as an assaulter should be. Another thing that has great cohesion with the low recoil stats of this gun is going to be the iron sights, which aren't necessarily the best thing in the world, but they are very serviceable and literally don't elicit any real complaints from me in my humble opinion. Maybe the front post could be a little bit larger, but I only say that because I'm going to highly recommend going for headshots on this gun. The only other viable strategy is going to be hip firing at point blank range. Other than that, you're going to be wasting a lot of bullets because, again, like I said earlier, it does kind of feel like a marshmallow shooter. And oh, by the way, this is the only gun out of all three that doesn't have a bayonet, so that's also a pretty sizable knock against it. But we'll see how it fares at the end. Coming up for contestant number 2, we shall now take a look at the SIG 1920 SMG. In the same vein as the SIG KE7 from my Japanese LMG video, this SMG hails from Switzerland, has the same inventors, and was purchased by the Japanese and used a good bit in the Sino-Japanese War, where it was often misidentified as the MP28. But to that point, the SIG 1920 is basically a MP18 with a few notable improvements, the most obvious being the magazine capacity. But before I get into that, we are getting a highest damage in the tier by a smidge, coming in at 5.7, which will drop down to 2.8 out to 100 meters. Muzzle velocity is best in the tier by almost 100 points, coming in at 430 meters per second. I can easily surmise that the SIG requires immensely less shot leading at range and also has substantially more range capability in general, if that is something that you look for on a SMG. And considering the terrain of the Pacific Campaign maps when you're not necessarily in a building or on the OBJ, that may be something that you definitely want to look into, or I can say that it may come in handy. I suppose the SIG can't win everywhere, as we are getting a lowest in tier rate of fire at 600 rounds per minute, but I personally do not find that to be too much of a detriment. Not too slow and not too fast, if you catch my drift. With this slight reduction in rate of fire comes a fire sustainment that can only be found in belt-fed machine guns, as we're getting an amazing magazine capacity of 50 rounds per reload. This will allow you to easily clear any interior or objective with one magazine if you have really good aim. I would be remiss not to mention the exponential increase to your kill streak potential per soldier due to the sheer amount of bullets you have. And it's even more crazy because the reload speed isn't even that bad, although it is worse than the tier, coming in at 3.3 seconds empty. That said, I would encourage you to do a lot of partial reloads to cut that down a bit, and it shouldn't be that hard considering how many bullets you have in the magazine to spare. Even more crazy is that the SIG 1920 has the best shot deviation in the tier, albeit by a smidge at 74, but a win is a win. The recoil percentage is standard for SMGs at 60%, with the vertical recoil being worst in the tier or highest at 27, but I do find that to be manageable because the horizontal recoil is coming in at a tier best or lowest 7. The pattern does gradually climb upward a good bit and to the right a good bit as well. Of course, the longer you hold down the trigger, the more unmanageable that becomes, but if you're decent at recoil control, I think you could honestly empty the entire mag and keep most of those bullets on target for the most part. It just depends on how many soldiers are in front of you and how many bullets you actually need before a reload. The last bad thing I'll say about this gun is that the iron sights, it's not even really a bad thing, but I'll say the iron sights are okay at best. Nothing to really rave about, but they are very nice and open and easy to acquire targets with. This gun is also going to drain your stamina the most at 5 kilograms flat, but it does make sense considering how many bullets you have in comparison to the other two guns. And this gun also has a bayonet on the front end, which helps accentuate the close range capabilities even more, unlike our previous competitor. Coming up for our final competitor, we gotta take a look at the Type 100 Late War variant, which according to the enlisted description was a crude version of the Type 100 early that also sports the increased fire rate. And I gotta say, that's a pretty crude but pretty accurate description, which is a rare occasion for the enlisted developers, as the fire rate is the first thing that you notice, honestly, being the highest in the tier at 800 rounds per minute. Unfortunately, as I hinted at near the beginning of the video, this is the other gun that has the lowest damage profile in the tier at 5.6 maximum and 3.2 out to 100 meters. And the Type 100 Late also has a lackluster bullet velocity at 350 meters per second. And when you take that into consideration with the fire rate, hopefully you can tell that that really forces or encourages very close range combat. But I will say that I have found a pretty hefty amount of success tap firing at close medium range as well, and I'll explain why that is a little later. The reload speed is first in the tier at 2.3 seconds, so even with the standard box magazine size of 30 rounds and a really fast fire rate that will empty your magazine faster than you can blink, it rarely ends up being an issue, even less so if you use the alternate reloading. The shot deviation is also tied for worst in the tier at 75, but it shouldn't affect your gameplay too much when you adhere to the effective range of the weapon. I believe the biggest reason this gun is able to stretch its range out more effectively than the Type 2A, I should say, is due to a combination of rate of fire and the improved recoil control percentage coming in at 75 instead of the standard of 60%. Not to mention with a vertical stat of 23, which is better than the SIG, and a horizontal stat of 9, which is even better than the Type 2A. The pattern is definitely the most violent and unpredictable, and as such requires the most thumb or mouse control, but the 75% recoil control percentage makes it substantially more manageable than usual. That said, it's easier to get a bunch of shots on target whether you're hosing people up close or feathering the trigger for slightly further targets. The iron sights for the Type 100 are pretty good in my opinion as well. The aperture is very nice and open, and the front post isn't necessarily amazing for ranged targets, but I can make, better use of it than I can with the other two guns by comparison. So I'd say that I'd give this one a slight edge as far as being the best in the tier. Not too bad for a crude late war weapon, I'd say. The last thing to note is that this gun is the second heaviest gun in the tier at 4.3 kilograms, but it also has a bayonet, so that's nice. But yeah, man, all that being said, to wrap it up in a nice little bow, I think this is one of those tiers where each gun is boasting some pretty compelling selling points, but there's still a pretty clear winner that gets you the most bang for your buck, or the most bang for your silver, I'd say. Coming in last for me is going to be the Type 2A. Like I said on the front end of my video, I think this gun was honestly in a good spot in the BR2 tier, because in BR3 it kind of gets trounced by its peers. The main draw of the gun is going to be the recoil being so low, and typically with guns like that you would hope that they would be more effective at longer ranges, but unfortunately that's just not the case for the Type 2A due to the bullet velocity and a tendency to use the majority of your magazine on 1 to 2 guys. If you attempt longer range combat, that is. Your best hope is to aim for the head, like I said earlier, or if you want to hose people at close range with this gun, it's pretty decent at that as well. But if you're going to use a SMG at close range primarily, then there are other picks in this tier that, again, get you a lot more bang for your buck. And last to mention, again, this gun is the only one that doesn't have a bayonet. Coming in second place for me, or going home with the silver medal, is going to be the Type 100 Late version. This is a great SMG for close range combat. The rate of fire is usually too great to overcome for most people you come across within 10 meters. The issues start to arise when you get outside that threshold, as the recoil does require, still a decent amount of active work, while you also have to be very mindful of the small magazine, which can seem to evaporate when you miss more than a few bursts. That said, I would say this gun is the more niched out of the three, excelling most in super close range combat, and anything outside of that is because you're mastering the gun and taking advantage of that increased recoil control percentage. And aside from all of that, what I appreciate most about our first place winner, the Siggy 1920, is the versatility you're presented with when using the weapon. When it comes to close range, you'll dominate because you still have a respectable rate of fire compared to any rifle user, but you also have the magazine capacity to kill 3 or possibly even 4 squads full of people, and then you have a bayonet to boot if if it really comes down to it and that's what you need to do. And when it comes to more range combat, you still have a slightly higher damage than the other 2 contemporaries, and the magazine capacity really allows you to lay it on without fear of running out of ammo before you kill the entire squad or the other person retaliates. This extends the distance that you're able to fight somebody if caught in the open, or vice versa if you see a squad caught in the open at range. And basically, to wrap it up in a nice little bow, I think the smidge higher damage and the extra 20 bullets that this gun presents you with in any given situation, whether it be long range or close range, is the best attribute that gives this gun the edge as far as being the best gun in the tier. But what do you guys think? Which gun is your favorite in the tier, or what do you find yourself using the most? At the end of the day, these are just my personal opinions, but I am hoping with the combination of the gameplay and my explanations, you can decide for yourself which Japanese BR3 SMG is best for you to use all the time and spend your silver on the most, buying over and over again and upgrading over and over again for your infantry. If you made it this far, let me know by aiming for that like button and shooting that subscribe button as well. Help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. And yeah, other than that, I do appreciate you guys very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Black Guy out.